Howdy y'all, Quiet Night Gaming here. With every new generation of Pokemon games that get released, there's always a lot of new features and aspects that get added to those games. We're going to be looking at additions to those games that have a lasting impact on the core franchise games. So that means that they're included in at least some or most of the following mainline games. So these aren't exclusive features to specifically that generation. These are what we define as contributions. Today, we're going to be doing Generation 1. So Pokemon Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow. This is the start of the Pokemon franchise games, so there's a lot of contributions to the later mainline games. We're going to be doing every generation, but today we're going to be starting with Generation 1. There was nothing before Generation 1. A lot of the gameplay aspects and mechanics are still used today. Chances are if you've played Generation 1, then a lot of the core elements will feel very similar to any other later mainline series games that you play. Let's start by looking at a few things in the early parts of Generation 1 that are used a lot in the early parts of later generations as well. One of which is the Pokemon Professor. Somebody you encounter early on in the game. They'll give you one of 3 starters, they have a lab, and they're named after a tree. For those 3 starters, they follow the 3 typings of grass, water, fire. They all have roughly the same base stat totals, and they're a 3-stage evolution. A main component to the Pokemon games is the battling mechanics. While more simplistic in Generation 1, has been carried over throughout every generation following it. In Generation 1, they established as a 1v1 turn-based system, where the Pokemon that moves first is based on their speed and move priority. When battling, you have to consider things like their Pokemon stats, the type chart, damage calculation, all of which determine your battling in wild battles, trainer battles, as well as gym leader battles, which it covers a main portion of the games. Another major component to the battling system installed in Generation 1 was the experience point system. This is awarded to your team members that defeat wild, as well as trainer Pokemon, which over time allow them to get stat gains as they level up. The level cap being at level 100, and each stat gain increasing their HP, attack, defense, and speed, as well as their special stat in Generation 1, which was later reworked in Generation 2. Another core element established in Generation 1 and used in later generations is the process of obtaining Pokemon. One of the main ways to obtain Pokemon would be through catching them in the wild, either through encountering them in the grass, water, or caves. Every Pokemon has their own catch rate, and you can increase those odds by lowering their HP, inflicting a status, or using a better ball to help catch them. There are other methods to obtain Pokemon as gift Pokemon or in-game trades, which can be throughout the game. Although not required to beat the game, Generation 1 established the theme of catching all of the Pokemon and filling up your Pokedex. The Pokedex being, while more simplistic in Generation 1, has been reintroduced in every generation afterwards, and gave trainers a basic idea of everything that they have caught, all of the Pokemon they have seen but haven't caught, and different species data to help keep track as they progress to catching them all. Generation 1's establishment of the Gym Leader and Elite Four system is also used in just about every other mainline series game in Pokemon, with there being 8 Gym Leaders with a specific typing, and your progress being checked throughout the game by beating the Gym Leaders. The Elite Fours also have a specific typing with 4 members, and then followed by a champion, which beating the champion rolls the credits and beats the main storyline. Pokemon has always taken a different approach when they release games. That all began in Generation 1, where they released 2 games in a region. In America, it was Red and Blue. And then it's followed by a quote-unquote definitive edition, which would be Yellow in Generation 1's case, afterwards. The encouragement of trading was established by giving version exclusives to each game, encouraging players to either buy both copies of the game or to trade with the player to complete their Pokedex. There are several interfaces that were also established in Generation 1, such as the Party interface, which has a maximum of 6 Pokemon that you can carry with you at any time in the overworld. If you catch more than 6, then it'll get sent automatically to the PC, where you can edit your party from the PC at any Pokemon Center by withdrawing or depositing the Pokemon. And you also have the menu interface, which allows you to access your party or your Pokedex, the bag and save and options, etc. And you also have the battling interface, which occurs whenever you're in a trainer or wild battle, allowing you to either fight, access your bag, or run away and access your team. All of these interfaces that were established in Generation 1 have pretty much stayed the same or very much identical to every other generation of game after Generation 1. When you think of staple locations and items in Pokemon games, a lot of them can be traced back to Generation 1. For example, the Pokemon Center. It's found in just about every town or city. It allows you to heal your team and edit them from the PC. Another which is the Pokémon, giving you various items that you can collect and buy from them that help you throughout your adventure. With there also being the department store, Generation 1 also established other ways of obtaining items, such as in the overworld when you see a Pokeball icon, you can go up to it and collect it from there, or using a hidden item finder to find items of locations that aren't necessarily denoted by a Pokeball icon. You can also be gifted them from NPCs, such as a gym leader. After you defeat them, you can get gifted a TM. There were many different types of items that were also established in Generation 1, such as healing items that you can use while in battle or in the overworld, catching items that you can use to catch wild Pokemon with Pokeballs, Great Balls, Ultra Balls, and Master Balls, TMs which you can use to teach your Pokemon a new move with the single use, and then there are key items which couldn't be deleted. These items would serve different functions with you throughout the game that would help you, such as the bicycle, the town map, the fishing rod, HMs, which were allowed to teach your Pokemon a permanent new move that would usually allow you to access new areas of the game, and these were usually progress checked by defeating different gym leaders, something that they use in a lot of the other mainline series games. While there are different item types in Generation 1, they weren't categorized in that way when you obtained them. For instance, anytime you would get any items in the game, they would all just be simply put into your bag and wouldn't be put into separate compartments. Finally, let's look at a few other miscellaneous things that Generation 1 contributed to. One of those being legendary Pokemon and the different types. A lot of mainline games use legendary trios, something that was used in Generation 1, as well as rare mythicals, something that usually are only obtained through other methods outside of the games, like a real-life event. Another is a villain organization. They're usually a part of the story and you have to defeat them as you progress through the game. It also started the premise for EVs and IVs, or DVs. In the case with EVs, it's stats that you gain for your Pokemon as you defeat wild and trainer Pokemon, and IVs or DVs are a random range for each stat when you catch a Pokemon, both of which give stat boosts to your Pokemon as you level them up to level 100. This started in Generation 1, although it was later reworked. Pokemon Yellow's release also added a few contributions as well. For example, the Pokemon Friendship, being tied to only Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow, however later generations also used this same idea. Also Overworld Pokemon Following You. Once again, this was tied to only Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow, but some later games used the idea of Pokemon following you around. That sums up my list of contributions that the release of the Generation 1 games had for the Pokemon franchise. I tried to cover as many important contributions as possible without trying to cover every small detail, since many of the contributions began in the first installments of the Pokemon series. I've also learned with the making of this video that Pokemon has kept a lot of its mechanics, both big and small, identical or very similar since being introduced in Generation 1. Please let us know if there are any contributions from Generation 1 that you think are worth mentioning, or any thoughts that you have on the video. We'd be happy to see them. We're doing all generations, so stay tuned for the contributions of Generation 2.